produced or in
have a certificate yet, which is why we can't show you any clips from it. Even if we could, we'd have to be very careful with them. Now, do you think that that decision to ban it, or possibly to ban it, is sensible, or would it be censorship? We'll get the row going in a second, but first of all, what they're saying across the pond.
Natural-born killers and Pulp Fiction are big hits here, but they've sparked off an emotive debate about the value and effect of violence on screen, and they've been blamed for several murders, where teenagers have identified with the thugs and psychopaths they've seen in the movies and gone on the rampage themselves.
People have enough violence in their everyday life. Make a film that's positive. Don't give people any ideas. There's already enough nuts out there. We don't need any more.
It doesn't glorify that violence. It doesn't dwell in it. You know, what it does is it doesn't take it too seriously, the violence. What it does, it was shocking about the movie is the idea of the violence and the way it's become part of the American landscape.
It was very much a piece of art, more than anything else.
Pulp Fiction's director, Quentin Tarantino, claims people who take it seriously are missing the point.
This movie is definitely a comedy. It's supposed to make you, it's supposed to make you laugh. All the scenes are designed to make you laugh. However, at the same time, there are scenes in it that aren't funny. There are scenes in there to be taken seriously.
It's absolutely absurd for people to say, well, this is a criticism of our violent culture. It is a celebration of two very attractive, happy-go-lucky, charming serial killers. Spending a couple of hours in the dark with the people that you meet in Natural-Born Killers or Pulp Fiction is not a prescription for making you a better person. In fact, these are two films where I think most people coming out of them feel that they need a shower and that you've wasted your precious moments of life on this planet and fallen very, very far from anything that might give you a sense of uplift, purpose, joy, or time well spent.
Violent films have always been controversial. In 1967, Bonnie and Clyde had a similar theme to Natural-Born Killers, two criminals on the run, and was attacked by critics as negative and destructive, glamorizing crime. But violence in the 90s makes Bonnie and Clyde seem like regular family entertainment.
OK, well, we have our studio panel here now, and we're going to be taking some calls on the phone in a bit later on. We'll just talk for a few minutes here just to sort of get the ball rolling and stimulate some calls. Carol Malone from the Sunday Express. Hi, nice to see you again. What do you think about this?
I mean, I've just watched the film you had there with Michael Medved, who, when he says it's a happy-go-lucky story of two people having a good time. 50 people got slaughtered in that movie. How can that be happy-go-lucky? Violence on the television terrifies me, and if it terrifies me at my age, what's it going to do to kids who are 14, 15?
You mean it frightens you per se? You think that it's morally wrong, or you think more than that? You think that it does actually lead to copycat?
Oh, I think there's report after report and statistic after statistic that says that it does do exactly that. It encourages and promotes violence.
All right, David Alton MP, you've seen the film. You were one of the people who went down to the preview, yeah?
No, I've not seen the
film.
film.
I was told you had. I beg your pardon.
I've certainly read the script
yes.
and seen the message that we've just heard about that's been projected in this film.
Yes.
And I think that anyone who reads about what the film says would surely have profound misgivings about the amount of violence that's in the film, although Oliver Stone himself says it's a parody on violence, but the subtlety of that message is lost, and instead of deriding violence, it therefore glorifies it. I think the issue for us in this country is, do we want to be exposed to more gratuitous violence or not? Isn't there enough real-life violence in society anyway? And this sterile debate about whether it actually has an effect on anybody, we wouldn't, on programmes like this, be seeing television advertisements unless someone thought they had an effect on someone. This year we'll spend nearly £2 billion trying to sell our wares through television advertisements. So clearly it has an effect.
All right, who here has seen the film? Who's actually seen it? Yeah. You saw the film. You are?
Nikki Sargent.
And you work in the media?
Yes, I run a production company.
OK, what did you think of it, first of all?
It was an excellent film.
What was the most violent scene in it, in your judgment?
I don't think any individual scene was any more violent than one in Basic Instinct that was ITV's movie last night. I think it was certainly very shocking, but what was shocking was the filmmaker's use of the media, in that throughout the narrative he showed you clips of existing movies throughout.
And how that would stimulate the kind of violence that you see in the film.
How it reflected what is all around us. It wasn't always from movies, it could be from nature programmes.
Do you think, in your judgment, that that point could have been made with a lot less violence and fewer killings, or was it necessary to have 50 murders?
50 murders.
No?
You may have seen 8, I wasn't counting. You saw no more violence than you would on TV in a Bond movie. Is James Bond a serial killer?
Why, you saw the film as well. Why do you think there's all the fuss about it then? I mean, if those of you who've seen it, and not all of you agree, but if those of you who've seen it say, no, it's a good narrative and it's making a very good political point and it's about society, etc., etc., why do you think there's been such fuss?
Because it's provocative, and Oliver Stone's trying to make you understand why dysfunctional children grow up to be serial killers, and you suddenly realise and you suddenly connect with them, and you think, you know, there for the grace of God go I. Thank God my parents were responsible and looked after me and brought me up properly.
What about go on, Carol.
Does anybody buy this argument that because it's happening in our society that films are just a mirror of it? That is no justification for it happening. That's no justification for doing it. We know it's happening.
Justification? Why do you need
Well, because Oliver Stone has been trying to justify his movie for the past, well,
he's been
for
trying
weeks.
to justify the misconception of his movie.
But also, I think the argument that it's an excellent movie is an interesting argument, because the Nazis made excellent movies. They made terribly...
They also had big censorship laws,
No,
massive censorship. They burned books.
No, but wait a minute.
They stopped people going...
Hang on, just let me make a point.
They made very, very good anti-Semitic movies. They made a very famous movie called Juice, which is a horrible anti-Semitic movie, which is still quite rightly not allowed to be shown.
You're arguing for censorship. You're arguing for censorship, and they were massive.
Do you believe in the Race Relations Act?
Hang on, we do have censorship, don't we? We have various gradings for videos, we have gradings for films. That surely you can't compare us to the Nazi state, can
No,
you?
I'm not, but she's just bringing up Nazis. She brought up the Nazis. I'm afraid I didn't.
I think what Mary is... I think what you make your point for yourself.
And have a very wicked impact. I'm just saying that as a principle. You know?
What was... We're talking about a specific movie,
It wouldn't be a good movie.
The
point is the context of violence. Just to talk about violence in the abstract is meaningless. One of the most violent documents in history is the Old Testament.
Yeah. I should introduce you. This is Professor David Cantor. You're a forensic psychologist. You think that films actually like this and Pulp Fiction, you think they're... Am I right in thinking this? You think they're less violent than James Bond?
Well, I'm saying it's the context, not the violence, that is the issue. What is the point and the meaning of the violence? You know, it's a fascinating thing. If you look at American films, when somebody is killed, it's often a success as in part of the storyline. In British films, when somebody is killed, it's often actually a failure on the part of the hero, that he's had to kill them. Okay. And it's that meaning of the violence that we should be looking at.
Well, let's talk about that. Where's Alistair Gurley, our headmaster? Hello, Alistair. You're a headmaster. Yes. What age of children are at your school?
5 to 11-year-olds.
5 to 11. Now, we read in the papers last week that this very dramatic karate series, Power Rangers, which have been shown on breakfast television during half-term, did lead, allegedly, directly to a child being taken to hospital with a split kidney because he'd been kicked in the playground. You banned your children from what, seeing it? You recommended they didn't see it? How did you do it?
I banned the sale of the books because, coincidental to drawing my parents' attention to the television series, we had a book fair and titles of the Power Ranger series were on sale, and I didn't feel I could draw their parents' attention to the series.
Because in your experience, young children will copy the violence they see on screen, is that right?
I'm sure they do. We certainly noticed an increase in the pseudo-violence on the playground.
You mean the kicking and the punching?
Kicking, never landing a blow, but the threat, the appearance of hitting someone was always there. And I wrote to my parents and said, I've noticed this, the staff have noticed it, please would you view the programme with your child?
I just want to... very quickly.
In Scandinavia recently, of course, not countries known for draconian censorship laws or anything of that kind, they have banned Power Rangers because a little 5-year-old girl was killed by her 6-year-old playmates after they'd seen that film.
Well, they stoned her to death, didn't they?
After they'd seen that film, and as a result of that, the Scandinavian authorities in Norway have said they don't want that film being shown on their television. Right. Now, we at least should study the evidence and not close our minds to the links that there clearly are between the levels of violence we project throughout the cinema and TV and the level of violence in society generally.
There's plenty of time to develop all these points later, but I promise you that. Very quickly, I want to finish just for now with 2 girls in the corner there. We've got who's Tracy?
I am.
Tracy. Now, Tracy, you've obviously not seen the film. Nobody has, except at the special screening. But have you seen Reservoir Dogs?
No, I've seen all the violent films.
You've seen a lot of violent films, have you? Well, do you think that, I mean, from everything you've heard about this particular film, do you think that it should be banned? Do you think it has an influence on young people like you?
I don't think it should be banned. I think that if people go to see a violent film and then after that film they feel like they need to be violent, then they already have that characteristic of being violent. Whereas I've been to see a lot of violent films and a lot of them are really futuristic and unbelievable that...
So it's so far out of the normal experience that people... What about you, Victoria? How old are you, by the way, if I can ask?
Pardon? I'm 17.
17. What do you think?
I think there's a problem with children getting hold of violent films. They're okay in the cinema, yeah. When they're 18, it's fine, because like 12-year-old kids can't go and see them. But when you get on video, you get like 5-, 6-year-olds seeing the videos, and that's what's damaging.
Well, there is some evidence to show that the Chucky videos have led to specific acts of violence. One horrible case in Manchester where a girl was tortured to death. Chris, just from you, from a doctor's point of view, and you're not a psychologist, but from a doctor's point of view, do you think that exposure to unstable people of films like this will lead to, if not direct copycat violence, something similar.
That frightens me, and you know, in the community we're seeing more and more patients taken out from you know, psychiatric wards into the community, and some of these patients are unstable, they don't take the medication, and they're very impressionable as well. And to watch violent movies, violent videos, I feel that people like that who are on the edge could quite easily go out and do copycat murders and severe violence, and that's very disturbing.
Well, let's just hold it here for now. If you want to join the debate then, the lines are open on 051 555 1000. Ring in, tell us exactly what you think, comment on what's been said already, bring up some fresh issues, and as regards natural-born killers, you might help the censor make up his mind. If you want the film banned in Britain, dial 0891 400 701. This is our phone poll, OK? But if you think that we should be allowed to see it, obviously on certificate, press 0891 400 702. We've had lots of calls already, and we'd like some more, please, so we get a good cross-section. Right, the results later, and if you're already seeing red after that... Should we have shown that? What do you think? That was one of GMTV's biggest ratings pullers since the days of Roland Rat, a rather gentler creature, but with one small child in hospital with a split kidney because some bright spark couldn't tell the difference between a TV storyline and reality. Is that just another example of TVs, cinemas, video rentals, sort of playing with fire? That's what we're talking about today. I know when we talk about censorship, we're talking about a selected group making a moral judgment on behalf of the rest of society. But isn't that actually just an extension of natural responsibility? I know you feel very strongly that we shouldn't be censoring our films. But aren't we just extending, if you like, the principle of responsibility for what we deny ourselves, quite rightly? You know, the pleasure in kicking somebody in the stomach, for example.
Well, we're talking about a film here. We're not here to justify violence. I don't want anybody to... I've seen the film twice. I don't want to kill anybody, and I don't think any film would make me want to kill anybody. But I'm over 18. I'd like my mind to be free from somebody else's control. I'd like to go and see a film and make my own mind up. I don't want somebody to impose their morality on me. I don't want to live in a police state. I live in England, and I'm really pleased I live in England.
All right.
One of the arguments is, though, isn't there, that intelligent people don't go out and commit murder, and you're an intelligent person, and you say you wouldn't. But the problem is, what that has been written about.
The IQ levels of serial killers?
What I was just about was serial killers might well be the exception, but generally people who commit murder are not terribly bright people. And they're the people who can't make the judgments. Most murders are committed in a domestic environment.
Those people that are murdered by somebody they know, not by somebody who watches a film and goes out and kills somebody.
But also, you made a big mistake when you said that these children couldn't tell the difference between reality and fantasy that they saw on the screen. The chances are that it was an accident. The children have always followed the images that they have around. I remember as a youngster jumping off a roof with a coat round my neck thinking I was Batman. That this sort of reflection of what goes on in the world and the images you get, children have always done. Whatever you give them, they will do it.
So if we're saying that happens, if you jumped off a roof as Batman and that was because you were affected enough by the image to do it, then surely it follows that if we see a particularly violent scene of the one we just saw there, then some kids will go out and do the same thing.
Yeah, but I didn't jump off a very high roof. The way Batman might have done. I knew enough of the reality.
Clinton, who didn't inhale.
And so I agree. I think the details of what is actually revealed may give people ideas for things they were thinking of doing anyway. And the film opens up a way of thinking that they will follow through on. But those people will be looking for something to hook it onto. So the fact that they did it in this particular way, in this case, when this film was around, doesn't mean to say if there wasn't some other film around with some other sort of imagery, those sorts of vulnerable people would still have hooked onto that.
All right, let's take our first call. Actually, I want to go to Susan. I know she was caller number 2, but I'd like to start with Susan, please. Susan's from Northamptonshire. Hello, Susan.
Hello.
Good morning. Now, you blame about 90% of your ex-husband's violence towards you on video nasties.
Yes, that's right. He used to collect them and he'd watch the same film over and over and over again.
Can you give us an example? What kind of film?
Carrie, The Fog, all the Freddy films.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, when he would watch it, he could watch the same film in the same day about 7 or 8 times. And he's got to the stage with one of his films that he's even got his answer phone, word for word, in The Running Man.
But how did that lead to violence on you?
He would get angry. He fantasised. I still believe he fantasised that he is part of these films.
Are you saying that the beatings he delivered to you followed immediately? I mean, as the credits rolled,
Not immediately after, maybe about a day or so after. Yeah. For example, I changed the kitchen round without informing him, and he watched a horror film the night before. And he come in, he said, well, what have you done? I said, well, I've changed the kitchen round. Why haven't you asked me? I said, well, I don't need to ask you. With that, the whole kitchen was upended. He smashed everything in the kitchen, and I landed up getting a good hiding over it.
When did you divorce him?
4 years ago.
Is he still up to his tricks with other women?
As far as I know, no. Maybe it was me that sparked him off. I don't know.
It's so hard to make a scientific connection, isn't it?
Susan, was he violent before he started to watch these films?
He was violent at the beginning of our relationship, back in the 80s. But I still think we didn't have a video in the 80s, but he used to watch a lot of horror films. He used to go out to the pictures to a lot of horror films.
Why did he spend so much time watching horror films? Surely it's a certain sort of person who's going to devote himself to that type of hobby.
It was a hobby to him, and it still is a hobby to him. He still collects video nasties.
I think it's basically an open question, isn't it? It's almost impossible to scientifically make the connection between his behaviour and the movies. Yes, David?
Well, of course, it is impossible to prove an empirical link, if you like. Nevertheless, it's interesting that nearly 30 leading psychologists, paediatricians, professionals in the field in this country earlier this year, led by Professor Elizabeth Newsom, said, quote unquote, we had been previously naive in underestimating the link between real-life violence and the kind of violence which is projected, dressed up as entertainment, but murder, brutality, and especially domestic violence as well, degradation of women.
Were not asking for it to be banned. What they were doing was pointing to the fact that there are vulnerable people in society, and just like we don't believe that everybody should have easy access to alcohol, that youngsters shouldn't easily be able to get hold of alcohol, so it also makes sense that they shouldn't easily be able to get hold of other things that they can't handle and that would be disinhibiting.
Just let me come to Dr. Chris Steele here. Chris, it's a medical fact, isn't it, that if somebody goes in and sees, say, a violent kung fu movie, say a young lad, they're going to come out with raised testosterone levels, with raised adrenaline levels, aren't they? They're going to be more capable, physically, of committing violence.
Hang on, but if you don't use facts as if you know what the scientific evidence is, and this is not scientific evidence, the same testosterone levels will occur.
You can't dominate the conversation. I'm asking Dr. Chris Steele a medical point. Go on, Chris.
If the facts you're presenting are inaccurate.
Chris, would you like to answer that question?
Well, I mean, even if I watch something violent, you know, it has an effect upon me, but I don't go out and do a violent act. But I think the danger is you've got people who are on the edge. They're not in total control. They may have violent tendencies anyhow. They may have grown up with violence around them, and it's almost part of the norm. And when one sees this, you know, this is sensational violence, isn't it? It's made to appear attractive. These people, they're heroes to some of the viewers who are watching. And if they go out and copy that, they themselves feel good about themselves. You know, they've done something, they've achieved something, although it's a criminal act.
All right, let's go on, Mary. Yes?
I just want to say, I became, that's how I started smoking cigarettes, because I used to watch Marlene Dietrich, that dates me, and Bette Davis smoking in the movies, and every time I see an old movie now on television, although I'm now an ex-smoker, I have a tremendous urge to light up a cigarette. So I think that I mean, it's an example that we can identify with, that if you see somebody smoking, you do want to smoke.
Where do you get your opinions from? Where do you get your opinions from?
This is my experience.
One of the disturbing things in the debate in Parliament was that some people were saying that because only 30% of households in this country now have children within them, an extraordinary statistic that I hadn't heard before, we shouldn't therefore pass measures to protect those children because it might adversely affect the majority. But this is absurd. We draw lines in the sand now over things like pornography. Most of us would say it would be wrong to allow explicitly pornographic material that exploits women and children to be freely and easily available.
It is,
and
in Smiths, though.
But it is far too freely available, quite agreed. So therefore, shouldn't we as a society also say that there is far too much violence, especially that degrades women, children, rape scenes, for instance?
Well, let's pick up the children point with Chris, who's calling us from Somerset. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
Hi. You want to call about Power Rangers? We saw that clip at the top of the item there. What do you want to say?
Well, I specifically called because I'm a fan of the Tarantino films, but the point I'm making is about this sort of sanitized violence you get on TV, not just Power Rangers itself, but the A-Team, which I admit to being a fan for.
Yeah.
Fan of for many years, even though it's quite embarrassing to admit it now. And the Home Alone film, which, I mean, if you've seen it, have you seen the Home Alone film?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much. I mean, people get hit with paint cans and fall downstairs and get set fire to, and they all get up, shake their heads and keep going.
Now, you're saying that's wrong?
Well, I'm saying it portrays a very unrealistic view of life. I mean, for instance, in Reservoir Dogs, which everyone has been treading on in the press recently, well, not so much recently, but in the past, the actual plot of it, have you seen Reservoir Dogs?
I haven't seen Reservoir Dogs.
Well, I'd recommend that you see it, partly because it's a very well-made film with excellent dialogue filming, but mostly because the actual plot of it is about actions and consequences.
But hang on, let's just ask this question. If we're talking about, say, the A-Team and about Home Alone 1 and 2 and probably 3, 4 and 5 as well, that's cartoon violence in a way, isn't it?
Nobody ever dies in the A-Team. And
Nobody's
never
ever
any
got shot in the
and there's
A-Team.
never any blood in the A-Team.
That's what it's all about.
Go on,
It's
Headmaster.
drip-feed violence, and it's drip-feed violence that we see reflected sometimes in children's behaviour in playgrounds.
Always.
They cannot identify.
Go on.
They can't necessarily distinguish between what they see on the screen and what is real life to them.
Now, is that true? I mean, I always thought instinctively that children did have a gut knowledge that when they saw a commercial, they were watching a commercial. When they saw Tom and Jerry knocking 7 bells out of each other, they knew it really wasn't for real. Are you saying, as a headmaster in an infants and junior school, that is not your experience?
That's not my experience with programmes like Power Rangers, where there are real people. Where there are cartoon characters, the children can differentiate. But where there are real people, such as the ones in Power Rangers, who transform themselves into these seemingly important and violent creatures, their children cannot necessarily distinguish. And this is why they play them out. This is why they act them out in playgrounds.
OK, let's go to Andrea Millwood-Hargrave. Where's Andrea?
I'm here.
You're there. Hello, hi, nice to see you from the Broadcasting Standards Council. You have become aware, since you took on your role there, that there is a massive public concern, not so much about the consequences of these films, but about the fact they're being shown at all.
I think not just the films, television programmes in general.
Yes, I embrace the whole thing.
And 2/3 of people we interview say that there's too much violence on television.
Do they say why they think there's too much violence?
No, they think it's attractive. And I think what is very interesting is that though they feel there's too much violence, they don't complain about it. 14% of the complaints we get at the council are about violence. 47% of them are about bad language. And I think that's one of the dilemmas that we have to face, the attraction of violence. But can I pick up a point somebody made earlier? We've also conducted a study of women who'd been victims of violence themselves, like your first caller. And they felt very strongly that if you did have roles in soap operas, for example, with violent incidents, role models should be seen to be negative. They shouldn't be made attractive, the perpetrators of violence. And also that the consequences be shown. And sometimes, though it was painful for them, they wanted to go beyond what was being shown because they needed it to be shocking.
OK, let's pick up another caller now. This is Melanie calling us from Buckinghamshire. Good morning, Melanie.
Good morning.
Hi, welcome to the discussion. You go to the pictures a lot.
Yes, my husband and I, we go every week.
Right.
So we basically see whatever's on the circuit.
Okay.
I have seen Pulp Fiction. My personal opinion of the film is it was a complete waste of money. It's got no beginning and no end. It just revolves around various scenes that all interlink. It's violent, but it's also funny. My main point I wanted to make was that I think we're getting very easy on blaming everybody else for a lot of society's problems. And now it seems to be the filmmakers who are coming in for the brunt of it. If we go back 200 years to the 17th and the 18th century, life then was far more violent than it is now. Look at Jack the Ripper. Now, where did Jack the Ripper get his ideas from? He certainly didn't see a film. Basically, I believe that people are born with either good or evil. Now, if somebody is inherently evil, it doesn't matter what they see or how they're brought up, that evil is going to come out. And that's what we're seeing. I agree with what some people are saying, that people who are slightly unbalanced shouldn't see these films. But at the same point, why should people like me, who I feel is a perfectly well-balanced human being and likes to watch films of all types, not just violent films, and come to my own conclusions after I've seen the film, why should I not be given the opportunity of seeing these films?
So you'd feel frustrated then if indeed the censors did ban this particular film that we're talking about? You'd feel that your rights were being infringed?
Yes, I think it's very easy for people to stand up and start waving the banners around and saying, oh, you shouldn't see this and oh, you shouldn't see that. Because you shouldn't dictate to to people about what they can and cannot see.
All right, we take your point. Robert Hamilton's here. Where's Robert? Robert, right behind me. That's why I couldn't see you. I thought you weren't here. All right, Robert Hamilton, you're a playwright. You've been writing, you would admit it yourself, violent and sexually explicit material.
Some of
it. I know I'm generalising, so you'll accept that.
Yeah.
You presumably agree with the last point that it is essentially down to right-thinking, morally minded people to make it their own choice whether they come to a play that you've written or a film like Those Wild Dogs.
18-year-olds, who have the ability to get married and buy a house and join the army and go off and kill people for real, should be able to make their own decision on whether they watch a piece of art or not.
Does anybody think that a violent film perhaps acts as a safety valve in terms of violence in society?
Well,
there are clearly cases in which people are very anxious about their own experiences, and if they see this sort of expression, some of these people will be able to live through that expression and deal with their own anxieties. Some people will be completely the opposite.
What did you say about Oliver Stone?
Well, Oliver Stone professes to have made this film partly to get rid of the horror he felt by being paid to kill people in Vietnam.
It goes back to what Aristotle
So, well, in that sense, he's working out his own hang-ups then, really, on the audience. It's not necessarily a good argument,
Can we all
Carol.
believe what the filmmakers say? Basically, their bottom line is big bucks. It's not to send
I don't think Oliver Stone... No, Oliver Stone has never made
Oliver
films
Stone's
that
movie
needed...
made $30 million in the first 2 weeks. It's about money. I mean, all this mess about they're getting rid of, he's made so many films
money. He could make Home Alone. He could make Home Alone 4 if he wanted to make money.
But
he could make Batman 9. He doesn't.
The man
he makes
revels
difficult films.
The man
he makes
has
films
admitted that he
attack
revels
his own
in
government.
controversy.
He makes films that attack his own government, attack his
It's
own
not difficult in America
judiciary.
now.
Well, it's not difficult, but he does it. He isolates himself from the people that actually run America. He stands up and says, I disagree with the system. I think it's creating serial killers, and this is my proof.
But he still makes money. I mean, it's a good point. He does make a lot of money.
Well, and that's wrong to make money. Hello. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Whoops. Big mistake there.
Why are you having this debate? Because you know it will attract an audience. Everybody climbs onto this bandwagon because sex and violence and things beyond the pale that we don't normally do are always interesting and exciting, and always have been. There are 4 people dead on the stage at the end of Hamlet. Major playwrights have always recognised that if you kill enough people off, you'll attract an audience.
I have to say, the scene where Gloucester gets his eyes pulled out in Lear is probably the most violent in the history of theatre.
Can I just say about Power Rangers, I think the most important thing is that parents should talk to their children about it, and that they should say, what did you think of that, and try to draw out from the child a kind of analysis in their own way, or make the child think about consequences, as you said. That's very, very important. And so parents should, I think that's the one thing that parents can do all the time.
Essentially, if there is a blurring in the child's mind between fiction and fact, between reality and the storyline, it's up to the parent to draw that line clearly for them, to mark it out.
Very definitely, and that was where I came into this debate in writing to my own parents. Not saying don't let your child watch this programme, the parents of the children at school, but watch it with them. My wife used to watch Grange Hill with our teenage daughters. She didn't enjoy the programme, but she talked it through afterwards.
Parental function. Can I just take
one
one more
call?
call?
Parents are prepared to do that. Families where parents are prepared to sit with their children and watch television are very different from families in which the kids are allowed to get on with what they want to do whenever they want to do it. And that's the key thing. It's the nature of what already exists,
Well,
what the child brings to the cinema with him.
Let's finish off then with the last call from Kevin, if he's on the line. Kevin from Staffordshire. Are you there, Kev?
Hello.
Hi. Now, you work in a video shop.
Yeah, I work in a video
Not
shop.
a guy behind the counter. You're saying, what, 11, 12-year-olds come in?
Yeah, well, we see quite often, like, 11, 12-year-olds come in with their parents, and they say, the parents say, what film would you like to watch? And they pick an 18 film, give it to their parents come up and hire it out for them, and it's what makes a mockery of the certificates, really, doesn't it? Because the certificates there saying, well, you're underage to watch it, but the parents are allowing them to watch it. Then they come the next day into the video shop and saying, oh, did you see that film last night? The way he had his head ripped off and the way his guts are blown across the screen. And
do you think it doesn't harm?
Well, by the way they're talking, it's not, to me, it's not in a way a natural 12-year-old should talk about having somebody's head ripped off and...
All right, just to finish off, do you think... Let's forget whether this actually breeds violence. Do you think that the kind of films that we've been discussing and the videos that Kevin sees kids walking out with their parents, if nothing else, don't they coarsen our attitude towards life and humankind?
And that is part of the problem, isn't it? They simply desensitise us, and we should surely have a much more idealistic view of the kind of country in which we want to live in the future. This isn't the entire picture. It's not just about TV or video violence. The materialist society we live in, consumerism itself, all these other factors, the amorality of many of our attitudes, where we're neutral about things, these are all issues to be taken in the round.
I disagree completely. I think we should have a balanced view of society. I think we should have filmmakers that make films that give us joy and we run out of the cinema going, isn't life wonderful? And also filmmakers that say, look, there's a really dark side to our nature and we should accept that and deal with it and be honest about it. No, I'm not saying it should be shown to children.
Some films desensitise us. Other films of violence actually sensitise us to what's going on. The impact of the anti-Vietnam activities in the States that were portrayed through the media had a big impact on the population at large in realising the evil that was going on there.
Okay. I'm afraid that was news footage. That was real film. Okay, thank you all very much. Honestly, I know we could go on to 12:15, but we can't. Okay, so thank you very much indeed for coming in. I enjoyed that. Thanks for the calls as well. And don't forget the phone poll. We've got the results coming up a bit later on. If you think that natural-born killers should be banned, it's 0891 400 701. And if you think there's no harm in it, it's 0891 400 702. And we'll give you the final results. We've had about 10,000. Majority, reasonably clear one for these polls. 54% say no, it shouldn't be censored. So I reckon that will please more than half of the people here, although not you, David, and not you, Carol.
No. I mean, we're not in favour of censoring. What we're in favour of is discussing the responsibilities of violence and looking at each case in its own
I think that result, though, typifies a kind of a British trait, which is we don't like to be told what to do, even if it's for our own good. Do we?
If you'd ask the question, for instance, do you think this should be made available as a home video, which children should have access to?
I'm sure you
My guess is the result would be the other way around, which is actually the point, rather than saying something should be banned outright.
Well, listen, thanks for staying with us for that result, and thank you for stimulating the vote. Thank you very much indeed. Enjoyed that today. Right, that's it for this programme. On tomorrow's show, we follow Princess Di.